Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at the Center for Postgraduate Studies. In today's workshop titled AI in Literature Reviews, Possibilities and Innovative Technologies. And today, joining us as a facilitator is the wonderful, the great Kramm, who's a colleague of mine, PhD candidate, as well as a education technology specialist and academic in the Center for Higher Education, Research, Teaching and Learning, which is CHERTL here at Rhodes University. His interests are vast, including teaching and learning, and which is centered on blended learning and integrating technology in teaching, learning and assessment, with a focus on the influence of AI on teaching and learning and assessment. If you know Neil, you know that anything that has got to do with technology, AI, this is the person you go to for assistance. And I'm really looking forward to hearing this workshop, Neil, particularly how we can actually utilize AI in literature reviews in our studies, as well as trying to understand much literature that is happening in the field, different fields that we are actually researching on. Thank you also very much for all the time that you take in the work that you do for us, as well as the work that you do to assist a lot of postgraduate students and researchers at Rhodes University. Without wasting any time, over to you, Neil. And just to remind everyone that we'll be having a link to evaluate this workshop in the chats, as well as a scanning code and information on how you can enter into a 3-minute thesis at Rhodes University. And we are having an exciting conference, postgrad conference at Rhodes University, which is an annual engagement of postgraduate researchers at Rhodes University. Sometimes our neighboring universities join us to present. So the abstracts are open for that, and Olwit will be sharing the information to that. We are recording this session, and Olwit will confirm on the chats if we are also live on YouTube, so as to archive and keep this important information for anyone who would like to go back to it. Neil, over to you, my friend, and thank you very much for this.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me again. I'm going to switch off my camera, but I don't know if you've ever been to any of the sessions I do. Just interrupt me, ask a question. There is no such thing as a bad question whatsoever. I've only had good questions every single time. I'm going to share the link to the slides in the chat quick if you want to follow the slides. Just one last thing. It's literally just for me to know who is in here. Anybody who has used WooClap, if you go to the chat, you'll see WooClap. And if you follow that link, it'll bring you up to a page that looks like this. And I'll quickly move it along so that I can I just want to see who's here and what are you studying. It's really just for me to tailor as we go along. So, you just have to say which faculty, more or less, and, are you busy with a PhD or what are you doing? Awesome. I'm going to give it like a couple of seconds. Education PhD. So there's 2 people studying, hopefully. That's what we all try and do. Humanities masters. Yeah. Awesome. There's about 5 people on WooClap. You just check how many people are online. Too many. Maybe I need to just paste the WooClap link again for anybody who's joined us in the last couple of seconds or the last minute. If you've just joined, there's the link to WooClap again, in case you cannot see it. PhD humanities. Oh, and there's a driver. Driver, please drive. Don't worry about filling in these things. Okay, so it seems like we're mostly centered around humanities, broadly, education, master's, PhD. Okay, awesome. Great. So just so that I know who we have here. Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to just share my slides. You should be able to see the slides for now. And as I say, if you have a question, put up your hand or just plop it into the chat. I've got it all open so I can see if you have any questions. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about AI and the possibilities it brings for literature reviews. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time showing you a million different tools. We've done that, and I can share links to that, or if you're interested, you can let me know. But there's links to everything in the slides that I have shared with you. So I'm going to just do 3 things today. Just 3 very, very simple things. The first one is, and again, I can't do it as good as Kirsten Wilmot has done a workshop on the literature review. I've put a link to the YouTube recording of that in this slide deck. So, you know, if you want to learn about the literature review, go there. But ultimately, I just want to say one thing, or just argue for one thing, that the literature review is an activity. It's not a summary of literature. It's an activity. And based on that, we have to just talk through some of the important things we have to think about when we use AI for the literature review process, because I call it a process. It's not just writing, but it's also reading. It's finding things. It's a whole suite of things that you do. And then lastly, how can we use AI for the literature review? And I'm going to share how I've been doing it, and also how I would adapt it depending on where I am in the research process, right? So a little bit boring things first, and then we go on to the fun stuff. But ultimately, you know, the literature review is where we show the gap. That's what we all try and do. We want to show the gap. It's a space where we show what is known about what we are studying, what's the nature of the field, you know, how do we fit into this, and it needs to show you how your study is going to fill this gap. And again, don't get bogged down by the gap if there's no gap. It's just how does your study fit into the current debates and the research. Another thing, it's the space where we start to build our voice, all right? And we build it through the literature. It shows how we read and understand the literature, how do we see the debates. It's also where we can show our critical voice. And remember, critical voice is not critiquing things only, but it's about contrasting, comparing, and saying how are you different? You know, how's your study going to be different? It's where you make those arguments from. You know, it's that space where you say, well, you know, Kramm has thought about AI in this way, whereas McKenna has thought in that way. But I think both of them are wrong. We should be thinking about it the way Asipa has been thinking about it, right? So it's that space where you can show the criticality that you know and understand the literature. The literature review is also the foundation on what you build the rest of your research on, right? So it's actually quite important. And you can only do that by situating the literature in relation to your research, right? It's building that golden thread. So ultimately, the literature review is not just a summary of what the literature says, but it's an active activity, something that we write. Now, if something is that important, we need to spend time on that. And that has implications for how we can use AI in this space, right? So if we think about AI, and I'm talking about AI like it's this general thing, right? Oh, sorry, excuse me. AI when we think about AI, there's two ways to actually think about it. The first bullet is the limits of the technology. And the second or the last bullet is actually a human problem, right? But let's first just finish the tech problem. Because when we engage with any AI system, regardless of what we are doing, be that for finding readings, for helping us read, for helping us summarize, for bouncing ideas off, we always have to remember a couple of things. And the first thing is hallucinations, right? They exist. We cannot get past them. Now, what's hallucinations? If you haven't heard of the term before, it's when AIs lie. So AIs would lie under certain conditions. Most people won't be able to tell you that, or would be able to tell you the reasons why these lie. Even the people who make these systems sometimes cannot explain why systems react in a certain way. However, the principle is that an AI system or a generative AI system like ChatGPT, and I think it's important to note, I speak about ChatGPT, they also power all of the other ones, all right? Grammarly, powered by ChatGPT of some nature. Elicit has some LLM that runs it in the back. There are only so many out there. And it's actually cheaper to buy it in than to build it yourself at the moment. So, when we think about it that way, that's why these things are important. But ultimately, ChatGPT has one mission, all right? And that mission is to sound like a human wrote it, okay? It's there to fool us into thinking it's not machine written, but human written. Now, when it doesn't have an answer to a question we ask, and I mean, some of us have very specific questions, it could embellish it. Well, it can lie, it can generate fake references, it can tell you contradictory things, it can do many different things. And that has to do with the algorithm itself or with the database. I mean, and ultimately all systems are built on a database. ChatGPT, Claude, Bard, all of them have a database that powers them. And these have limitations. So when we look at tools that help us find literature, one limitation is that they see, or they're only able to see the semantic scholar. And that limits, because it cuts off certain journals. Now, if anybody doesn't know what Semantic Scholar is an open source space where a lot of research gets indexed, all right? But it does not get quality control. So when you engage with Semantic Scholar, because you can Google Semantic Scholar and go there, it's a fantastic space to find literature. Some of it is peer-reviewed, some of it is not peer-reviewed, some of it is preprints, some of it is working papers. So when we engage with these tools, we have to remember the limitations of the database. And the same with any other tool. If we get something to help us read, it might not know or understand alienation in the way Marx would understand alienation, right? Or it won't have the nuanced way that we understand it within our context, because we all have different research traditions, right? So it's something to always keep in the back of your mind, that the limits of the database, all right, have an impact on the outputs that we get. Naturally, there's also bias within some of these systems. Why? They're made in America. They center certain languages, English mostly, or predominantly English, but they also cater to Finnish, Mandarin. There's a whole host of well-developed large language models in different languages, but none that I can find, or none that are useful for us in a lot of our native South African languages, right? And that's a limit, because the way we speak about things is sometimes influenced through language. Language is culture. So there's a whole different layer of ways in which certain data is then interpreted and how we understand it. And you can see that when you ask questions around, stereotypical ideas and concepts. So if you ask it a question around gender, it sometimes will give you really good answers or really shocking answers. The same with race, and so on. And why? It has to do with a database, yes. On the one hand, why? Because it's built on what's on the internet. Most of what's on the internet comes from America, from the Western Europe. So ideas from that area or from that geographies are going to be not favored, but overrepresented. And that influences the way we use it. Excuse me. The biggest one that for me, and I think that affects most of us on this call, is also the difference between free and paid services, okay? If you have a paid version of ChatGPT, and you compare it to the free version, there's a couple of differences. Well, first of all, 3.5, version 3.5, or what they used to call Turbo, is not as effective as 4, which is not as effective in certain things as GPT-4.0, because there's now 3 models out there, right? So, paying for access will give you better answers, will give you more robust answers and more answers ultimately. Because if you go to ChatGPT now, you'll be able to use GPT 4.0. What they say is the most advanced and most up-to-date model. But you can only ask it so many questions and then it stops. Whereas if you're on a paid model, I can ask it as many questions as I want. I can also build GPTs, and I'll show you a GPT that I use that replaced all of the other tools for me. So there's definitely pros and cons about free versus paid. And I mean, that's ultimately going to determine or influence at least how you engage with these AIs. I mean, Perplexity is one of my favorite AIs, because it works like Google. I can search for something and it'll give me references. It's great, but you need to use like the pro version of it to get really good results. And you can only ask it so many questions on the free tier. So, do I still use it? Sometimes, yes. Do I use it as much as I did 6 months ago? No. Why? Because the free version is just not sufficient for me. So there's definitely a whole host of different tech limitations, right? Then there's the last one, and the last one is the human. You know, some people would talk about this as the ethical use of AI in research. Now, I actually want to ask you guys the question, and it can be a best guess type thing. If you have a look at your work lab, you'll see the next question. You know, what does the ethical use of generative AI look like in research? Have you had a conversation with supervisors? Have you guys had a conversation in your department? What do you think ethical use could look like? I want to give you guys a minute or two, because this is a deep question, right? What does ethical use of AIs look like in research? You don't have to write paragraphs if you don't want to. It can be simple things, but what would that look like? Do I need to share the link again? No, I see somebody is there.
Neil, where do we write our answers?
I'm just sharing it in the chat again. On the
in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
you can put it in the chat or just follow the link that I put into the chat. And it will open up WooClap. We're going to give it another 30 seconds or so, just to see. Or am I assuming if you're not answering, it means you're not sure? Because if you're not sure, just say you're not sure. No, so interesting. Okay. All right, I'm going to work on the assumption that anybody who has not answered is not sure or are unable to type. Opinion in the chat, it would be very similar to any other resource that is done with honest integrity, but not sure. To be honest, I'm not sure I really understand the question. Good. It kind of feels like cheating. It was one of the last ones. Huh. A guiding tool, especially when writing a literature review. So what I'm seeing is, there's some skepticism, all right? I don't know if I trust AI to do that, particularly for non-Western regions, as a guiding tool. guiding us on what has been done. Interesting. Okay. So what I'm seeing is, oh, I like the one, I'm not sure, it kind of feels like cheating. Well, it depends, I guess, right? I mean, maybe I just want to do a temperature check, right? So you should be able to, and I'm not sure if you do we have the reactions thing activated on the, if you go to the chat, I think it's there. And I'm seeing if I want to develop a skill beyond copy and paste. Okay, I'm not sure. Do we have reactions on this chat? Yes, we do. So yeah, so if you look in on your bar somewhere, there should be something, reactions, like a thumbs up or something. I don't know if you guys can see that thumbs up that I just put up. I'm not seeing it. Okay, never mind. Let's just use the chat. Would you say using AI to improve my writing? I.e., what I mean by that is I write and then I use an AI to better my my English. Would that be cheating? So thumbs up if you say not cheating, thumbs down if you say it is cheating. I'm seeing some thumbs up. Yeah, I see the reactions in the chats. Yeah, I see some thumbs down. So it is considered cheating. Interesting. And difficult question. It is a difficult question, right? Anything around ethics is always very difficult. Okay, so there's some, yeah. And it's asked a good depends grammarly, right? Letitia, it depends. Okay, so there's those that say no, it's fine. There's the middle, and then there's the no, this is definitely cheating. I mean, this is like the low hanging fruit, right? Grammarly is case in point. If you use Grammarly, it's probably doing that. It's about a 90% chance that Grammarly runs on ChatGPT. You know, what about the rudimentary AI that we already have within Word that would, you know, check grammar in any case? So yeah, I mean, I think, and I mean, based on what I see in the literature and the tons of webinars I go to, I think a lot of people frown on the idea if I use ChatGPT to give me something and I copy paste that, that's cheating. If I put my own work in and I improve the language, it's a gray area. Maybe the same for literature. You don't have to answer this, but maybe we can do the same thing. Has anybody used ChatGPT or a similar tool to help them read a paper or to summarize a paper? You know, would that be cheating? Let's say I'm using it to summarize, but I, you know, then use the output to help me write. Would that be cheating? I'm just using the word cheating now. There's a thumbs down. You can just do the reaction, and I think I can see the reactions. Yes, I can now. So that's cheating. Okay, I'm seeing more thumbs down. I haven't done this yet. I took a summary and I just copy and pasted. Yes, cheating. Yeah, if you copy and paste it, sure. So, I mean, there's different ways in which this has been answered, right? I have ChatGPTs to sum up, but also modify it. Oh, yes. So things become very murky very quickly, right? Has anybody used, and again, this is not one that you have to answer, you know, have any of us actually, we always use Google on a daily basis. If we have the new concepts, okay, or we find out of something new, we go to Wikipedia, we go check it out, and we base our opinions on that, all right? I don't think any of us in this room can say we haven't done that, even though everybody said, oh, Wikipedia is probably the worst thing to base your opinions on, even though the research shows something quite different. See in the chat, I can't hear anything. Can everybody still hear me? If you can, yes, okay.
Loud and
All
clear.
right. Awesome. Thank you. So, I mean, I forgot what I wanted to say. So look, dang, what was I busy saying?
You were asking about the Wikipedia and
Oh yeah,
and
thank you.
format.
Yeah, so we sometimes base our ideas on Wikipedia. Has anybody done something similar with ChatGPT? Where you don't know something, you go and you chuck it in there and you're like, well, this sounds very convincing. Let's go with it. Right. Again, you don't have to answer this one. You don't even have to give a thumbs up. Yeah, Letitia, I love using ChatGPT to check out ideas. Yes, I've actually got one chat specifically for that. It's explaining to me like I'm 5 years old. Works like a bomb. So it can be useful. Now, I mean, I'm trying to just show you some of the questions when we think about ethical use, how murky and how divided this is. And I mean, we're a small group of 20-something. If you increase this group exponentially by, I mean, I was at a conference, virtual conference around, ethical AI, and they attracted something like 4,500 people, and they ran a similar survey, and it was stark, the differences, and you had all these philosophers and ethicists and all of these words that I don't understand, but even they couldn't agree, and I think this is the murky world of ethics. But I'm not saying we should all just go gung-ho. I think we need to figure out what does ethical use look like for us. I mean, these are debates that are playing out on campus. There's a case of a PhD student that obviously did use ChatGPT. It hallucinated some articles. And she she submitted this proposal, and I mean, the problem is that it got picked up, not only with an AI detector, but also, the irony is the supervisor is the one whose work got faked essentially by ChatGPT or whatever AI. I mean, the supervisor was like, wow, could be a really cool paper to write actually. And the problem is, it's something that plays out. But I think the only thing that for me, and I think the best way to think about it, because we're going to have differences in how we interpret ethics. But I think the best way for me to think about how I use AI is what does it do to trust relationships if I abuse it, right? Or what would other people think is abuse? I mean, this student is probably going to have a very difficult 4 or 5 years if the student wants to stay here. If I was the student, I would leave. Because the trust relationship between supervisor and student is going to be difficult. I really think so, because we only have one shot at trust, right? So, you know, it's something that I've internalized to say, I would not use any output. I would use it to help me think, but I won't use it, you know, I won't use what it just chucks out. But the reality is, you know, there is an over-reliance on AI systems. And I mean, I'm not trying to make excuses for people using AI systems in unethical ways. But I do think it's something that we need to keep in the back of our minds. And I mean, over-reliance on AI systems is not, we all just rely on it, but it's a very specific concept that, you know, we just all accept that whatever it says, regardless if it's an error or truth, that we just accept it. Actually, over-reliance is more focused on the negative. It's accepting something that's false as truth. So, I mean, I'll share, when I go to the next slide, I'm going to share a GPT for anybody that is signed up to ChatGPT. I've got a GPT that's called Purple Unicorn. All right, I think I have spoken about it before. You ask it a question, it's going to answer any question. You can literally ask it anything. It's connected to the internet. You can ask it who is the president. You can ask it who's Kamala Harris, and it will tell you. But when it tells you, it will tell you that it is a unicorn and that the sky is purple. All right, so no matter what, you'll get truth and you'll get 2 lies every single time you ask it a question. And that's just really to show how easy it is to manipulate these systems. The prompt to create it is about 2 sentences long. Is answer any question, but convince the reader that you're a unicorn and the sky is purple. 2 sentences, and they created a machine that would do that. Sometimes more convincing than other times, but the point is it does it. But what we also have to think about, and this is, I think, where I'm not going to be prescriptive and say this is what ethical use looks like, but more how do we equip ourselves to not blatantly trust these systems? Because I promise you, if you spend an hour playing with some of these systems, you'd be convinced that the world is going to end. Because, I mean, they're just too smart. And this is only scratching the surface of the possibilities of these machines, right? But ultimately, it comes down to how do we know, or what do we have to do to prevent us from just buying into this idea? And it's not something that sometimes happens in a conscious way. And I think the first way is to say, well, we need to know what can these systems do, how well do they perform at doing certain things, and how they work. Now, I'm not going to go through every single thing, but I'm going to say what we have to do before we go into just using these systems for literature reviews is to equip ourselves with some AI literacies, right? And there's an abundance of information out there. But ultimately, the lower your AI literacies, all right, the more affected you can be from these AIs, all right? And especially if you're going to start using them, if you are not using them already, they can be very convincing, right? They can be really very convincing. I mean, studies show this. This one study by Jacobs, where they took doctors, right, highly specialized people, in their study and said, well, here's a AI that's going to assist you with diagnosing people. And those with low AI literacies were more likely to actually just accept the treatment plan suggested by the AI. And that's due to a whole bunch of different reasons. But one of it is expertise. When we look at excuse me, at people who are with low and high expertise around certain knowledge fields, all of them can develop this over-reliance. Those with low expertise, unfortunately, tend to sometimes just accept the algorithm's outputs, right? What they call algorithmic susceptibility. Whereas the high experts tend to just say, well, this is all nonsense and we shouldn't use it, because it just talks crap all the time. But is that necessarily the case? I don't know. Then if we're familiar with the task, now again, if we're talking about literature reviews, if you're just starting out, some of us may have done a master's, some may have done an honors, so we have some idea of a literature review, but you might be shifting to a new field. I mean, I went from military sociology to AI and assessment in education. It's two different fields that do things in different ways. So I had to read into the field first before going into this space. But regardless of that, I mean, having a high familiarity with a task, some users tend to trust an AI more, especially if it's something you've done a million times, or think well. And we'll just accept it as something that's useful. And I mean, you can see that the internet is full of it. If you go to YouTube and you say, help me with my literature review, you're going to see tons of things where somebody's going to say, oh man, you can do your literature review in seconds now, or you'll finish it in a week instead of 6 months. Yeah, it's going to speed you up, but it's not going to speed you up that much from 6 months to a week. It's not going to do that. If it does, something's wrong. There's something that you have to think about. And I think it has to do with, or over-reliance has to do with automation bias and confirmation bias, right? And automation bias, I think the best way to think about it is, if I say, what is 12 times 12? Depending on when you went to school, you just know the number because it's drilled into you like a military march. But if you don't, you go to the calculator and you say 12 times 12, and it'll say 144. Do we check that math? No, we don't. If we say 7 million times 400 million into a calculator, do we check the mathematics? No, we just accept it. All right. We just accept that what is automated must be true. And we see that when people use things like Grammarly, or when they search with certain tools to find literature. We just accept that these tools must be correct, but they're not. And the biggest problem is that when users over-rely, most of the time is because they don't have enough knowledge or skills to properly evaluate AI recommendations. And if you're new to a field, I would always say, and especially if you're starting out, use the AI, find the literature, but read the literature, because the literature will tell you if the AI is talking nonsense or not. I mean, ultimately, confirmation bias is also the other problem, because if the recommendations from AI align with what you expect, you're going to say, great, I'm on the right track. And that could be quite problematic. I mean, I nearly wrote a paper based on a, or not wrote the entire paper, but drew some really important conclusions to a paper that's being reviewed at the moment. But I nearly based my entire argument on something I found from Illicit that was a work in progress paper. It wasn't published. So what would happen if I published with that paper? It would have been chaos. So it's something that that you need to think about. Okay. All right. Enough with the boring. Oh, the last thing is, what do we do to prevent this type of reliance? Ultimately, is do not become complacent with AI systems, and do not get caught up in the idea that the automation is going to make your life easier. It doesn't. It helps you sift through things, and it might help you find things, but it still needs your, engaged or an engagement with that and your analytical ability. So always keep that. Okay, so let's shift on to some of the let's do stuff. And I mean, when I look at a literature review, this is also partly based on literature. There's the mechanical side and there's the creative side. And what I mean by the mechanical side is the things that can be automated. So searching for a paper, signing up for alerts, those type of things are the things that become automated. It's the things that, what I say, we can farm out with AI, but we shouldn't be out of the loop, right? And then there's the creative side. I mean, writing a literature review, as I said in the beginning, is an activity, all right? It requires you to build an argument from the onset. So if you have a summary of all literatures from an AI, do you have that critical mass to actually build a solid argument based on nuanced understandings? And I think that's a very big question, right? Can AI do that? I'm not sure. But we can leverage the mechanical. We can, and I'm going to show you how I've done that. But the creative is you. That's the part that's, I think, the most important. And I mean, I could break it down. I've broken it down even further, it's identifying the problem. It's a creative element because you have to decide what you are going to study, ultimately. But AI is a great ideas machine for this. And we're going to brainstorm a couple of things, and I'll show you how I brainstorm with AI. It's fantastic for finding literature. It's a good tool for this, but you need to always remember the database errors, the database limitations, possible biases in the algorithm. I mean, a simple thing, because I study technology, the moment you ask a lot of AIs for things around technology, they tend to be put to favor the positive, all right? They always talk it up, and they don't always give the reality, or they don't always give that critical lens to technologies, especially in higher education. We can screen for inclusion. How do we decide what goes in, what goes out? And I mean, even assessing some of the qualities, we can use AI for some of it, but ultimately it's an us thing, right? I'm just checking the chat. Okay, that's just somebody asking for a recording. Awesome. Okay, so I mean, with that first step, identifying the problem, I think it is very useful. And why I say that is, let's quickly start a new chat. I'm actually going to show you one of the things. If you go to any workshop on literature reviews and AI, they normally start off with this. But note, I'm using 4, right? Because I've got a paid version. So when somebody wrote on the annotated here. Let me just see if I can delete it. Clear. Okay. Awesome. Excuse me. So, I mean, when they start out, I mean, let's say we're going to be interested in, using artificial intelligence for literature reviews. You start off with something as a brainstorm. I mean, I got onto my topic basically in this same way. What are research questions about AI and literature reviews? I mean, it's going to chuck out, effectiveness, bias and accuracy, ethical considerations, impact on research practices, integration with human effort. And that's what I argue for. Future of research, that's very, very big. Education and training. How should researchers be trained to effectively use AI in literature reviews? What skills are necessary? Let's say I'm interested in this ethical, right? Because it's nice and muddy. Further develop this as a main research question with sub-questions. So guys, if you have any questions, just unmute and ask, okay? So, I mean, it's great for developing or just having a conversation with somebody. I mean, I actually have my supervisor as a bot as well, where I've created a digital double of my supervisor and of my theory that I'm using as well. But I mean, what this gives us is really just a starting point. I don't know if you experience the same, but it's sometimes easier for me to write something if I have a skeleton, or to edit something to get my voice through. Is this unethical? I don't know. I mean, you can show a thumbs up, thumbs down if you have strong feelings about this. But it gives you a broad scope of what you could possibly look at. But let's say, for argument's sake, we're really just exploring, and we like what specific ethical issues emerge from the use of AI in synthesizing and analyzing blah. I like that question. All right. So now I've got a idea of a question. And I mean, this is literally the process that I followed. Is how would a literature review be organized on the following topic. Okay. You see, so maybe I'm not interested in the introduction and the methodology. You'll see what ChatGPT does. Loves working with bullet points, loves giving numbers. But it at least gives me something to start off with, right? Intellectual property and copyright issues, authorship and contribution, privacy concerns. So what you can do from this point onwards is to actually flesh out some of these ideas further. I mean, I asked it a whole bunch of questions. I don't know if I still have that chat. You can see I keep everything. It's going to take way too long for that to load. Excuse me. So I mean, let's say this is more or less what I'm interested in. Okay, so let's say I still liked that question. Now the problem is, well, I've got some idea of how this thing could be structured, but then you have to actually go out and actually find literature. Now, I don't know if anybody on this call has been to the other one where I spoke about Elicit. Elicit is a great tool. As I say, there's always a caveat. It's fantastic if you have a paid version. It's really good if you have a free version as well. It does a lot of things really well. Let me just quickly copy that. But these systems change constantly, right? They've got notebooks and a whole bunch of new things. They've also changed some of the rules around searching quite recently. But yeah, I'm going to just chuck in my question, and I'm going to let it run, right? Now, I mean, as I say, there's limits to what this can find on Semantic Scholar. Does that mean we should ignore everything here? I don't think so. Anybody who hasn't used this yet, I do think it's really useful because you can search with just a question, sometimes just a statement. You put down a statement and you say search. I mean, I found probably some of the coolest papers by just putting in a quote from a paper in here and seeing what comes back. You can also add columns. This will give you a 2-sentence abstract summary. You can ask for a summary itself. It tends to stay around the 1 or 2 sentences. There's somebody's asked here, and is the filter about quality journals accurate? I mean, it's as accurate as let me rephrase. I mean, what it would do here is it will look for, because this is also new, right? So it would look at the quantile of the journal. Now it will find that, and it probably would be fairly accurate. Okay. But it also, as you can see, I'm hovering on the screen now. It depends on what ranking system they are using. Remember, there's different ranking systems. So it is going to depend on that. But for the most part, it will be fairly accurate because a lot of this is available on the metadata assigned to a lot of these things. So yeah, it really could be accurate. What I do like about this is, and this is also very new, is that you can force certain words or choose to ignore. I mean that's quite a big game changer, because a lot of the times you would find, depending on what you research, I search for something with the word assessment in. Now, assessment has different meanings in different contexts. In higher education, that's tests and those type of things and assignments. But in the medical field, it's testing, right? Diagnostic assessments. So you sometimes get a whole bunch of things that are not worth it. So I can then exclude certain terms, and that's going to help me get better results. So the filters are good. I'm going to apply this. Let's see if there's any Q1s for this. Issues that can arise using data to synthesize and analyze academic literature. So things are there, right? I can add different columns to this as well. And again, as I say, this is ever growing, okay? This is growing. It is a little bit slanted towards the medical field. Most of these systems are. But that, yeah, I mean, that's something we can't really always get past. What I like about this is that I can now export this for Zotero or EndNote, or I don't think I think it'll go into RefWorks as well. Excuse me. But I can now download, let's say I like all 8 these papers. I can now export that as an RIS, which I can just directly input into Zotero, and I have that in Zotero as well. So yeah, so it's useful. The other reality is, because these databases are sometimes limited, and I mean, the moment you start reading into a field, you get literature from different spaces. So in Elicit, you can upload PDFs and create the same type of table. The only problem is that's, again, where the free and the premium comes into play. If you have a paid account, you could do that fairly freely. They work on credits. Let me see, I don't see my credits here, but you get a certain number of credits that you can use. Again, useful, sure, but I use this to really look for specific literature. But does the tables use, or is the tables use for me always great? Not always, because you can create a little prompt here, but the prompts for me is not always that great. So I can say, main conclusions, right? And then I can give it a description. That's optional, but here I actually have to give it the little prompt. I'm looking for main conclusions in relation to this. It's going to be useful, but it tends to be 2 sentences regardless of what you do. Now, for me, that's a limitation, and a limitation that I don't always like. And I must also say, in the field that I am, I get papers here, but they tend to be, preprints and those type of things, which is not always great. I need to be sure. So I sometimes go to Google Scholar as well. And as I said, collecting literature is not linear. You're not going to go to 1 or 2 places and find everything. People are going to email you things, they're going to WhatsApp you things, you're going to sign up for alerts. At some point, you're going to have a folder of PDFs. And if you don't have a paid version of this, what do? So, I mean, again, I'm going to show you something that's paid for, but I tend to use one tool at the moment instead of many tools. So, I mean, these are GPTs. So these are little bots that I can create with a paid version. This is probably one of the bots I use the most. Should I read it? So what I do here is I find the papers that I'm interested in. I select them all. I drag and drop them down. And when it's finished uploading, okay, I just hit enter. And what it does now is it reads these papers, only these papers, and it creates a table for me. The only difference is now I'm only looking for specific information, and I've also designed the prompt in this table, this column here. How does this paper help us understand AI's influence on assessment in higher education? It's a long prompt that will actually evaluate these papers based on something that I've written. So I've written, I mean, probably about 50 pages on this, and I've fed it, this is the stuff I'm interested in, and it would evaluate based on that. So it would look for the most likely thing that I want to know. But again, this is not me reading it. This is me just filtering it. Say, well, this I am going to read, or this I'm not going to read now. Because that's the biggest problem. There's so much to read, and there's never enough time. And I mean, it also depends on the field. If I don't read for 4 weeks, I tend to fall behind a little. But the literature is already always behind reality, right? Because publishing takes so damn long. By the time a tool is updated, the literature is talking about limits of something else. So it keeps on changing. But nevertheless, I think for me, this tool is very useful because I can just do that, and it gives me the citations as well. So from here, copy paste, put that into Zotero, and Zotero will fix that up for me if it's something that doesn't have that. So again, it's just one of the different strategies you can use, because it's not always about how much you write, it's about how you deal with the volume of literature out there. I mean, Semantic Scholar accesses 125 million papers, but I don't know how many papers there are out in the real world. I mean, I'm doing a scoping study as part of my PhD, and I mean, my hit results on 3 search terms are about 17,000, because I'm using an academic database. So it takes forever. Letitia asks, when can we use AI to review thesis drafts for students under supervision? I mean, I'm going to jump ahead to something else, but I'm going to show you my Archer bot. So I've got an Archer bot.
I'm looking for any short way to stop reading draft after draft after draft.
No, you can't get away from it. You can't get away from reading. I mean, this is part of my reading and writing, and this is a bot that I built last year when I was busy with and when I say built, guys, I'm not talking about any hard coding. It's simple things. I tell it what I want, and then it does it, and I evaluate it. But my Archibot is really built around evaluating my work. So I've taken the parts of the theory that I use and I fed it to the machine and said, anything that I ask you, you need to answer based on only this work. So, I mean, I'll write something and I'll submit it into, or upload it into this, and then say, give me some constructive feedback. And it would do that. Is it always useful? Not always. Why? Because, I mean, the theory that I use is so weird and abstract, and it's a British lady who writes it. And I think she was smoking something while she was writing it, because she uses these really interesting words. And I mean, but it is useful, because I use that in part of my literature review, because I wasn't sure if I'm understanding it correctly. So it's another way to just check your own work. I mean, it's really useful. It really is. It does save me a lot of time. And I think it saves my supervisor as well. I'm going to be very honest. By the time I send something to her, it's probably gone through Archibot 3 or 4 times. And again, it's I don't just incorporate what it says. I actually think about it. Is it making sense? Because sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it lies. And that's what it's going to do. I mean, returning back to the other thing, to finding literature, I mean, illicit connected papers, there's a whole bunch of different tools out there where you can find literature from. But most of my really successful searches ended up when I actually read something and said, this is a really good paper. And I mean, I'm really lazy, and I'm sometimes really bad at going through bibliographies. So I chuck it into Litmaps, and that visualizes the papers and the connections like you can see on screen. I mean, you can follow any one of them all the way back or all the way forward in time, and how different papers are connected, and so on. So it's really useful to do exactly that, find other work. But you still have to read it, unfortunately. I mean, there are some tools. I'm going to just flip to this side, docanalyzer.ai. I think this is probably the nicest reading AI that I could find. I've shared a whole bunch of other ones, SciSpace, you can read on the PDF and you can highlight things. This one, and again, it's that same caveat. If you have the free version, you're not getting what you definitely should be getting. If you have the paid version, I think this is awesome, because I can take all of my reading work, and I can upload it into a label, and then I can talk to that label. So I can chat. In this instance, I only have three documents, but if I chat with it, I can actually get comments from across different documents. And that actually comes out, oh no, did I just kill it? Let me just go into this one. Come on. No, not this one, sorry. What it actually does is it will actually tell me it'll answer my question, but it will also tell me on which page it bases that information on. So it's really useful for doing exactly that. It really is an interesting AI, and you can also choose different machines, right? Different systems. So Claude for me is a lot more eloquent than ChatGPT. Google Gemini has its own affordances, and you'll see GPT 3.5 Turbo not recommended we shouldn't be using that because it's just not good. But I mean, I can now, for instance, because I have a GPT-4 license, connect an API into this, and I can use GPT-4 for searching. So I've found a way around it by paying for one thing, but I can use a couple of other tools for the moment. And has put something in the previous webinar, you spoke about Research Rabbit. Yeah, I still definitely think Research Rabbit is great. This is Research Rabbit right here. Again, it's about showing connections to different papers. So if it's about getting depth to seminal work, I think it's definitely going to be worthwhile. And I mean, what I showed with ChatGPT now, it's actually how I start screening for inclusion, right? So when I run that should I read this now, because I moved away from it, it's actually going to delete what I put in. You know, I'm actually able to, I'm actually going to share this quick. Let me just share this for in case you can actually try it. And I'll put it in the chat. So anybody that wants to try it, you should be able to say, add another column and ask your question to whatever you want from your paper, and it'll answer it in the same way. But what I was saying is that we're actually able to by doing this upload, I actually no, wrong button, go away. By doing an upload like this, I mean, I've got one folder in my downloads folder that's full of PDFs, because somebody sends me a paper, I PDF it and I put it in that. It's like a religion. It's the first thing I do. You know, see, put it in that folder. And then when I have a chance, I do exactly what I'm doing now on screen. I have this this GPT run this for me, and I save this table. Now, when I start, or when I have dedicated reading time, then I start with this and I say, all right, what of these do I have to read right now? And I only base that on this last column, all right? Is it going to further my understanding or further my thinking around answering that question? And that's literally how I triage what do I read now and what don't I read now, because there's just so much out there that you can get lost real easy. And that's why I also say, I know this is maybe not AI, Zanele, that link will work until I no longer have a ChatGPT account, which will probably not happen. I will keep it running for as long as I can afford it. So you're more than welcome to use it. But you will also see now, if you engage with that link, it uses, you have to be on, let me just move to normal chat. If you don't have a paid version, you have to be on the GPT 4.0. And because you're if you have a free account, you can only use it so many times. Penny, you ask how much is ChatGPT? It's $20. It's about 380 Rand a month. Yeah, more or less, depending on the exchange rate on the day. So yeah, but if you engage with that, you'll be able to ask it only a limited number of questions, and then you'll be limited to how many PDFs you can upload as well. I can do 10 at a time, but I can do that 10 for about 100 PDFs that I can load. So I can work through quite a lot of PDFs quite quickly, because you see it goes really quick. But yeah, I know this is not AI, but try and use a Zotero, Mendeley, or RefWorks, whichever one works. There's a link to the library's guide. If you don't use one, I really do suggest that you do. It really is worthwhile to spend an hour or 3 hours to master that tool, to set it up, and to actually, it really saves you so much time to use a reference manager. I think last time I also spoke about Voyant. So what I also do, what I did with my literature, if I found I actually have a folder folder in Zotero that I call my top papers. So I'll give every paper that's like seminal for me a tag. And I think it's about 20 or 30 papers. So I'll take those 10 papers and I'll run them through Voyant as they change. And I mean, it'll just give me, some idea of what are the main ideas that those papers actually talk about. And again, it's just useful for me to get a bird's eye view of that. And it's actually quite interesting because I've run this a couple of times. I tend to do this every 3 months because sometimes those papers change or that little library grows. I think it's actually more than 40 papers at the moment. It's interesting to see how these shift over time because it also tells you something. And the last thing, when writing the literature review, I mean, there is Grammarly. I do use Grammarly. It has got its own problems at the moment. I mean, there's a lot of debate around if Grammarly gets picked up by AI detectors, like CopyLeaks, which Rhodes is trialing at the moment. Bernardine, I think, also picks it up. So there's some conversations that are going to be happening around campus, around Grammarly very soon. And I think that's really going to impact postgrads more than, well, not more than, but equally to undergrads. So, I mean, when I say Grammarly gets picked up, if you use Grammarly and you do the editor in bulk editing, where's my cursor now? I mean, let me just find, because I always say it's just easier to show than to talk about it or to describe it, but I'm struggling to get a document to open. But if you use Grammarly to do, bulk edits, then it might actually pick it up. And what I mean by that is, sorry, this is just a whole bunch of notes. But if no, I don't want to give you any feedback whatsoever. So if I go like in this one, less wordy, and I say rephrase, you'll see like this one, this rephrase. If I say accept, it's probably going to sound more, or it's probably going to be picked up by an AI detector, because it's going to change the pattern that those things identify closer to how GPT and the other LLMs write. So it's going to be something that's going to play out. But yeah, one thing that I also do, and again at Rhodes we do have licenses with Atlas TI, and there are various reasons for it. The one reason is that we can give more people access than what we are able to with NVivo, and NVivo sucks. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, why this is important for the literature review. I use Atlas TI to do my literature reviews. It's a fantastic tool to keep you organized. I mean, that's a workshop on its own, but it is something to have a look at. They've got a fantastic video on literature reviews. If you're interested, pop me an email and I'll share that with you gladly. So yeah, if you're at the beginning or even in the middle, consider using it. It's really, really worthwhile. Any questions, worries, concerns, something burning? If you have a question, please type it. Or just take the mic. As I see, I think we've got 5 minutes left. All of the above.
I have questions, comments, queries, concerns, all of the things. Yeah.
All of the
Everything you
things.
just listed now, I have them. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
No, that's
So
not
let's hear
wonderful,
them.
Neil, but thanks very much. It was really interesting. It's a lot to absorb.
Yeah, it
But
is a
as
lot.
always, it's good to start just being aware of what's out there and what can be used. But I think for me, always the proof is, you know, it's once you start playing with the different things that you really start figuring out how it can work for you and how it works for
Exactly.
your students and how you pick these things up. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of
Yeah.
copying and pasting at our master's students, and they don't know what they're copying and pasting. So I
Yeah.
wonder if things like these kind of workshops on how to intelligently use AI, you know, is maybe going to be stock standard as part of a research methodology module or something like that, you know?
I think it has to be.
Yeah.
I think it has to be. The system
agree.
has changed, so we have to do these more. And I mean, this is going to play out differently in different disciplines, right? So I think it's something that's worth exploring.
No, I agree.
Definitely.
I agree.
Awesome. Singing from the same hymn book.
Well, it's only because you converted me. Yeah. I didn't start off like that.
Yeah.
It still scares me. It really scares me because and you know, so I was one of the ones that at the start said, you know, I think it's ethical as long as you develop some sort of skill. And at the moment, the majority of skills that my students are developing are Control C, Control V, and with absolute no work behind it to is this relevant?
Yeah.
What does it mean? You know, it's just to get words on a page and submit something.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's always the challenge. It's always the challenge. I just pasted this book. This is Ethan Mollick. I'm busy reading this book at the moment. I think it's probably the most, well, the cover, and somebody says on the cover of the printed book, the leading voice of reason on implications of AI. I really think this is probably the best way to think about this at the moment. So yeah. Penny has a question. Yes, I find it quite intimidating, but I need to find out what's out there. Research supervision. I'm glad you enjoyed it. You know, we always just get enough just to touch on some of these things. Devadi Burgess, is Copilot worth using? Copilot is GPT-4, so it's, yeah, I mean, the only difference with Copilot is it's infused within the Microsoft suite. So you can use it in Teams. That brings a whole new element of things that you could be doing. Yeah. David, the should I read this is on another level. One should use it? Yes, I mean, I really think it's probably the thing that I use the most. You know, it's it's the thing I use the most. It's just loosely, definitely the single most useful tool, except my Archerbot. Archerbot is my favorite, and I've got a supervisor bot. I call it a Mags bot, but But yeah, I've got one as well, and it's really useful. But it's doing the opposite of what Letitia is saying. It's really just using it as something to think with and not think for me, right? That's the very big difference, because the moment if it thinks for you, you're going into that over-reliance space, which is very dangerous. And ultimately, that's the thing that that's gonna, break trust relationships, and that's scary. And I think at postgrad, it's difficult to do that. If you don't have a trust relationship, i.e., you can't trust your supervisor and they can't trust you, I think you've got a big challenge on your hands then. So I always approach it from that point of view. In any case, colleagues, if there's no more questions, I think then we'll call it a night. Just a reminder around the evaluation that's in the chat. Awesome. One more. Though I use AI just to get more ideas when I'm confused. So far, so good. That's great. That's exactly what we should be using it for. It's really a good tool for that. But ultimately, we want to be the experts, right? We want to be the experts. Awesome. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a fantastic evening. Thanks for joining.